Welcome to Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton. I don't remember. I'm sure there's been a team that's had 2 post-race disqualifications. I just can't remember when. All right. You ready to go, son?
I am ready to go.
Hello, welcome to Hard Compound, the American take on Formula One, featuring the smartest discussion of the sport. Race 2, China. Somehow more chaos than Melbourne. 3 post-race disqualifications. Not just both Ferrari, but poor Pierre Gasly as well. Another 1-2 from McLaren. Seems like they got the fastest car still. Pretty much since Miami last year, it seems like. But I don't know. Mercedes ready to strike. Solid team. Maybe the best young rookie driver. That car's getting better every week. Down the other side, though, is Liam Lawson. I don't know. I mean, when the other rookie drivers are rocking you and it's just the second race of the season, that's brutal. All right, son. What are your highlights from the Chinese Grand Prix?
Highlights from the Chinese Grand Prix. I mean, this is the first race that we, I guess, got a good look at true competitive race pace. You know, wasn't raining or it was pretty much perfect conditions. Everyone was complaining about how hot it was, and therefore the tires were degrading super quickly. But, you know, ultimately we got to see who the fastest people were. Fastest drivers, fastest cars. And you're right. I mean, it looked like McLaren has this season locked up. If they can stay out of their own way, you know, it kind of seems like, all right, we're just going to run away with this and make sure one of our drivers wins the Drivers' Championship also. But, you know, we still got George sitting in there in third place, biding his time, seems like. Yep. So, you know, good from George. Antonelli, I think, has had an up and down first 2 race weekends, but looks more or less comfortable and like he belongs in F1, which I think is good to see.
Yeah, I mean, he's a teenager. That's just 2 F1 races. 1 was in, bad conditions. So
yeah, I mean, he's been looking good, and Ferrari's just gonna Ferrari. You know,
they find a way.
Max is gonna Max, and
yeah, he finds a way.
Haas, maybe I spoke too soon, but like, this is the weirdest fucking team on the grid. Okay, every season is, you don't know what you're gonna get.
You can tell I'm a Haas fan because before the season started, I was like, Haas is committed to this season. The mid-pack, all those basement dwellers, they're all looking at 2026, but not Haas. And then what happens? They come out and they just look terrible. And I'm like, well, that's it. I was wrong. But now this week, Ocon gets the point. Behrman got points.
Double points finish.
Ocon, I forget who pointed this out to me, but of all the cars with a Ferrari engine, 2 races in, he leads Ferrari. Ocon at Haas. More points than Leclerc, more points than Hamilton.
Yeah, absurd. And I mean, obviously helped out a lot by the disqualifications post-race. Right. But I mean, yeah, 2 races in, you're thinking, no, he's maybe the last of it's 6, right? The 2 Saubers, the 2 Haas, and the 2 Ferraris. Yeah, but it is what it is. Hopefully they keep it up. It seems like, to me, just to talk about Haas a little bit more, since they don't get nearly enough airtime, it seems to me like the new team principal, as of last year, right? Ayo Komatsu.
Yeah.
He has done a good job of just sort of stabilizing the team, it seems like. I'm not sure how much more input Gene Haas has had or investment that he's put in, but it seems like since Günther Steiner left, the team has just had a bit more of a solid platform to build from. And I mean, it did not look good in the first race. And I think they tend to be an up and down kind of team. But at least this weekend, they looked like they had, even without disqualifications, even without, anything crazy happening, they were up there. they did a good job. It wasn't like, oh, somehow we figured out how to make our one-stop strategy work. It's like most of the field did one stop, and they had the pace to stay up there. So it's good to see from that team that they're actually at least reasonably competitive for some races this season.
Yeah, and I think that will continue. I'm not going to knock Gunther Steiner, the fire team principal. I mean, he basically took Gene's money, took sponsor money. He built that team from scratch. But, Gunther's he likes to have a good time, and he's a hustler. He's always got to have, he's always got to have deals going. The pot's always got to be bubbling. He's got to have plates spinning, But an F1 team, it's like you need that solid foundation. And I think they just never had that under Gunther. But I think he got the team to a spot where they could have that. I don't credit Gene Haas with any of that. I credit Gunther Steiner with building that foundation. So I don't know. I may be back to my prediction where they come in fifth,
Yeah,
but the other teams, I mean, they're just looking at 2026, looking to sell, or, it's just Ferrari being Ferrari. So who knows what's going to happen. Now, the winners, McLaren again, looks the fastest. Went from Lando winning last week to Oscar winning this week. I mean, it's going to be interesting to find out who their number one is, because there can only be one number one. And they are loath to make that decision, but they got to make that decision. And Lando is certain that it's him. And I think most fans think that it's him, but who knows?
Yeah, I would tend to agree that from the outside, it seems like Lando, especially given where he finished last year in the standings, that he's sort of the number one championship contender. But I think it's something that Oscar's not going to back down from, and that's nice to see. And McLaren is just, I don't know, they seem to not wish to make up their own minds. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I think it may end up having a detrimental effect on that team, but
we'll see. Similarly, I mean, were you right? I've been knocking Lewis Hamilton, not knocking, but I'm like, look, he's past his prime. He went to Ferrari for the money, for the fortune and glory. But we should not be expecting Lewis Hamilton to compete for any championships, even at Ferrari. But Ferrari gave him a good car, and I still was suspicious. I was like, no, Charles has been with that team for years. And you were like, no, Lewis is going to take the reins. It's going to be his team soon, and he's going to outscore Charles. Now, they got disqualified, but he won the sprint. I mean, it just seems like Max always is the only one who ever wins sprints. Lewis won the sprint. He didn't look great. Neither did Charles, though, but they looked okay this week. Maybe you're right. Maybe this is going to be Lewis's team, which I think is just a shame if Leclerc lets that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily expect Lewis to come into the team and immediately take over and dominate. So the fact that he is sort of right there with Leclerc, or at the very least near him, is, I think, a good sign for him and for Ferrari. I don't know how good of a sign that is for Leclerc, but maybe getting pushed a bit more could be good for him. But yeah, I mean, Lewis out-qualified Leclerc, I think, in both sprint and race GP. So that's a good sign that he's got that qualifying pace in him, because Leclerc has consistently been a pretty darn good qualifier. I think in the race, Ferrari just doesn't look all that good to start the season in terms of full race pace. But he was able to, from pole in the sprint, kind of lead that pack, and at no point did it really look in jeopardy. Piastri didn't really put a whole lot of pressure on him. So he looks solid. I think he'll continue to find his way. And I mean, Leclerc didn't seem to want to let Lewis just kind of take the reins this week. He kind of came back at him during the race. So I think it'll be a fun battle to watch. But ultimately, I think Lewis has a lot more races under his belt. He has a lot more experience. Not that Leclerc is inexperienced by any means, but he's got kind of that racecraft and the understanding of what it takes to win. And I think his sort of guile will serve him well at Ferrari.
Well, this is why I think Mercedes could win the Constructors this year. They've got a good car, a solid team. I mean, look at the cars that look the best so far this year. We'll start with McLaren. They look the best. That car looks the fastest. But there does seem to be some greater variance in their setup, which gives an opening for, say, Ferrari, for Mercedes. But they've also got that hot button issue. They've got two drivers who both think, hey, I'm the best in the team and I got the fastest car. I should win the championship. They've got that. Then you go to the next car, Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton's like, hey, I'm Lewis Hamilton. Step aside. Charles Leclerc's like, hey, I'm Ferrari's golden boy, and I've been here for years. There's a lot of team dynamics happening that, this could, cost them a race, cost them points. Then you go to Mercedes. That car looks reliable, fast, maybe not as fast as McLaren, maybe even not as fast as Ferrari. We'll see over the course of a season. But, I think Kimi Antonelli understands, as good as he is and as much faith that Toto has in him, this is still George's team. And George is going to be the number one, in my view. I think they could pull this off. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's totally fair to say. I mean, they are sort of set up currently how I think McLaren was set up last year, 2 years ago. When Oscar first came into the team, he was a rookie, very talented. Took him, maybe a third of a season, half a season to really find his form. But, as they improved the car and Piastri improved in form and got more comfortable, they started to really take it to other teams. And with Lando being there for quite a while and, just being an overall very good driver, they had a very solid team. And I think that's kind of where Mercedes is setting up to be. So I think you're probably right in that if Antonelli just kind of continues to improve and get more comfortable in that car, they have a good enough car to contend for a championship. And really, there's no inter-team like turmoil. Yeah.
Strife. It sort of adds something that probably isn't going to help them win races for Ferrari and McLaren. And I think Mercedes doesn't have to deal with that. And Toto likes that. Toto, I mean, he kept nice guy Bottas there for years, when it was Lewis versus Rosberg. All his fans loved that, but Toto did not. He's got the team he wants now. So now, interestingly enough, so Lewis gets first points for Ferrari, another win for McLaren, Max just doing unbelievable work in that garbage car. I think, though, the big news of this week is over two drivers who basically did shit. Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda. Now, Liam Lawson was garbage all weekend. Yuki wasn't garbage, but, you can blame the car, but he didn't do anything over the weekend. But everybody is saying Yuki is going to get that Red Bull seat finally. And it's going to happen in the next race, Japan. He's Japanese. That's in 2 weeks. Red Bull loves that kind of media serendipity. Oh, we're going to put Yuki in at the Japan race. Of course, Christian Horner loves that big dick energy, which Liam Lawson just loves to swing it around. But it's like, hey, brother, I'm sorry, you got to deliver, though. You got to deliver. And he's not delivered. Now, the first race was in the wet. Second race, he also, it might as well have been for him, for all the good he did, which was nothing. But, that car has been garbage. I mean, like I said, people were ridiculing me over saying last year that was the fourth best car. It's just obviously so tricky to drive. I mean, does Liam Lawson have a future at Red Bull? They've had to ditch Kvyat, Ricciardo, Gasly. Was Albon ever at Red Bull? He was, right? Yeah, he got moved and then he got bumped back up.
Hamilton's fault that he got bumped out. So.
Right. And Horner did him well. He made sure he got another seat elsewhere eventually. But I think Max has been covering up just how bad that car is. Anyway, that's a long way around. I took the long way around that one. I went on the outside there. I mean, do we think Liam is going to get booted after 2 races? Do we think Yuki's going to get the Red Bull seat? Give me your thoughts.
Well, so I think that car looks tricky to drive. And honestly, it seems kind of set up to almost Max's preference. I don't see any other way he is driving that well in a car that's just shit for him, right? Like, I don't know. That would be
Maybe,
wild.
but I mean, look at before Perez. Ricardo still had a good year left in him, but none of these guys were necessarily all-time greats. But I mean, Kvyat, I don't think Kvyat ever was in a Red Bull car, but Ricardo, Albon, Sergio Perez, these are capable drivers. I'm not sure it's just to Max's preferences.
Right. I think he is better than anybody else, which helps. I think he also probably likes to drive on the edge, and this setup for this car is kind of on a knife's edge, which makes it challenging, I think, for anybody else to come in and get a handle on it. And I think, nobody else on the grid, nobody else that has driven since Max came into F1 really has been able to stand up to Max, except for maybe Lewis.
Yeah.
And I think not only is it challenging to drive that car, but it's challenging to drive against Max. And I think he does, to your point, kind of cover up a lot of the challenges that other drivers are facing. And so, I don't know. I think Red Bull is not a team to shy away from booting a driver in the middle of the season, although they refused to do that with Perez for years. So I think it would be odd for them to immediately get rid of Lawson 2 races in. They could have put Yuki in that car. They could have gone out and signed Carlos Sainz. They could have done a lot of stuff. They chose to go with Liam Lawson. I don't know that you give up that choice 2 races into the season. That seems ridiculous. Especially not to Yuki. I don't think Yuki's ever getting that seat. So
my view, and this caused great controversy and much gnashing of teeth. I'm like, look, if Yuki was good enough for that seat, he'd have had it. He'd have had it the start of this year. He'd have had it last year. They held on to Perez when they had Yuki. Let's do the undercut. Will Liam Lawson survive this season? Will he still be in F1 by the end of the season?
Based on the first 2 weekends, I gotta say no. I mean, he really did not look like he improved this weekend, right? It's kind of like 1 step forward, 2 steps back sort of a thing where, coming into this weekend, it's like, okay, I got to just put the race in the wet behind me, whatever. All right. Then he qualifies last again, or basically last.
Yeah.
And then he had a good sprint. I mean, he made his way through the field. Obviously, they were all at the back of the pack, but, he showed he had pace. He showed he had fight and, I don't know, fair bit of courage. I mean, some of those moves were frightening to watch. So, I mean, he looked impressive. And then later that day, qualified last again for the race. And then on Sunday just looked not good at all. Yeah. So, it's like glimpses. We saw glimpses of the good. And obviously we saw glimpses of the good in the last 2 seasons when he came in for that Racing Bulls team when Ricardo was injured or after he got the boot. So, there was obviously enough talent there to show Christian Horner and Red Bull, I have what it takes to race for your team, right? And so they gave him that spot. It just doesn't look like he can handle it right now. So
it's tough.
Given 2 races to see where he's at, I don't know. I don't see him lasting through the whole season.
Ouch. What about next question? Does Yuki get the Red Bull seat this year?
No, I don't think Yuki ever gets the Red Bull seat. I mean, I think Yuki is fine, and I think he's continued to improve and all of his time in F1. I think he gets better every year, but I think there are other options for Red Bull besides Yuki that gives them more value.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if Red Bull was going to be a long-term partner with Honda for example, which has a relationship with Yuki. I could see them saying, okay, this makes sense. But yeah, I mean, Yuki, in my view, I mean, after all these years, he's a mid-pack driver, and I'm just not sure what you gain by putting him there. Maybe if that car was so good and they were confident of winning a constructor's title with someone just reliable in that second seat, I could see it, and a relationship with Honda, but neither of those I think really exist. So I'm with you. Although, next question, he's no longer with Red Bull, but supposedly the aerodynamics guru, Adrian Newey, so involved in making that Red Bull just so good and so many championships, credited him. I don't know if this Red Bull doesn't look so good. I mean, did he snooker Aston Martin? They backed up the Brinks truck for this guy. He's not a driver, I mean, did he snooker them?
Well, I am confident that Lawrence Stroll could get snookered by anybody with a technical background, because he just wants to wheel and deal and buy the best. And if he's been told that somebody is the best, then that's his target, right? And so he'll do whatever it takes. So, I mean, probably. I think we talked about this when it happened. But Adrian Newey's not a god. It's not like he's the only one that worked on this car, and he's the one that drove the car and set up the car and all this stuff. It's like Max obviously had a lot to do with that. There's hundreds of other engineers at Red Bull Racing that are working on this car and doing all this stuff. I think maybe the philosophy, Adrian Newey's philosophy, was a big part of how they developed and set up the car, and that ultimately proved super valuable to Red Bull. And, the rest of the team, including Max, took it from there. But when your drivers are Lance Stroll and a 44-year-old Fernando Alonso, maybe you don't have quite the same on-track presence. And then, how much is he going to be able to change over the course of the 4 months that he's been there? It's not like they have completely overhauled their 2025 plans because he came in and brought his whole new setup in. I think he's not going to get Aston to a place where they are regular contenders any more so than somebody else with his level of experience could.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think Adrian is great. He's got a track record to prove it, but it's like, look, at this role, there's just so much you can do, and I'm not sure he's going to get that Aston as a championship caliber team. And I'm also, in agreement about Lawrence Stroll. I mean, the man, he's a multi-billionaire. He owns an F1 team, but his weakness obviously is if he's been convinced that something is better, and it could just be like, I could say, oh, this artwork is better. Oh yeah, I like that one the best then. That's sort of how he makes his purchase, but that's not, good for him, but that's not building a team. That's just buying the most expensive stuff out there. Although, speaking of Aston Martin, Alonso, he spun out the first race. This race, the car just died on him. I mean, and the ultimate embarrassment. So I go to check the standings. I go to the official F1 page to check the official F1 standings. His name's not even on the list. He doesn't even show up as 20th place. They basically have no 20th. I was like, damn, I don't know. The old man may just have to call it a day.
Yeah, I mean, he's got no finishes, right? So
right,
but did he finish the sprint?
Wait. Yeah, literally, you go to the official F1 page for the official standings. There is no 20th
are 19
driver.
drivers currently listed in the 2025 driver standings, and Fernando Alonso is not on here. That is unfortunate.
He's not in last place. He does not exist.
Wow.
I know.
All right, let's look. China.
Yeah.
That is tough. I mean,
he may have to just That was tough. Now, on a different topic, dirty air. Let's do dirty air. Speaking of Liam Lawson, I saw his girlfriend. I was like, damn. And then I was like, if this girl goes to college, I 100% guarantee you she goes to Arizona State. Now, our non-American listeners may have no understanding of what that means, but let me tell you, I just spoke some truth. Okay. If she goes to college, she goes to Arizona State, and she does, and it's Arizona State. I'll also say this, in addition to the damn, I mean, these guys show up with their girlfriends. You know, Carlos Sainz got a model girlfriend. Charles Leclerc has this lovely girlfriend. George Russell always has somebody on his arm, and they all look like these, beautiful models or supermodel wannabes. She, on the other hand, I guarantee you, this girl's an assassin. I mean, she clearly is using F1 as the cover to travel around the world to take out various people. I'm just saying, just look. Someone needs to look into her background, Patrick.
Well, maybe the New Zealand government has,
Yeah, what are they up
met
to?
with her, and
you can't trust New Zealanders, Patrick.
Well,
that's
look,
no.
I mean, first of all, how many of them are there?
I know. So it's easy. It's easy to not trust them because there's not that many of them.
Yeah. Well, all I'm going to say is I think I'd quite like to be an F1 driver's girlfriend because that sounds kind of nice.
What
just hanging out and,
what are we doing this week?
Yeah, we'll just go around, travel around the world,
right? What are we
hang
doing
out,
right? We'll jet to Tokyo next week, and then there'll be some celebrities there, and we'll order some room service from the penthouse. Yeah, that's not a bad life.
Sounds good to me.
Not a bad life. Switching to the soft compound, I saw that Apple TV is losing $1 billion a year.
Well, that's embarrassing.
And I was like, well, look, I know why Apple TV is losing money because it sucks. It's a shit product. But $1 billion a year, it's like, wow, that's intentional. I don't know what you're trying to destroy, but, that's no good. And I was like, look, I'm going to save Apple TV. They need to buy F1, all the F1 rights, starting off in the United States, US, and let's say North America. Buy the streaming rights. Get it off of ESPN, which is doesn't do a good job. Get it off of ABC, which just 2-3 times a year shows thing. Just put on Apple TV. All the growing number of F1 fans in America with money in their pockets will get an Apple TV. Will subscribe to the F1, and it's an alternative to F1 TV Premium. They can get other content. I think this is a good idea. Oh, and I also had another idea, which was they need to buy not just the rights to stream it, but see, this is the problem. Apple would never do this. Like a YouTube model, for example, where it's like, look, anybody can have this content. So you and I could have this content. Maybe they charge us like for every viewer we get, we have to pay $1 or $100, whatever it is. But people might want to see the F1 race with us giving our live commentary, or with somebody else, with 5 sorority girls, with 2 old men, with the little kids. I don't know. I just think like there's so much that we can be doing with this content that we're not doing.
Well, I agree, but also, I mean, if you're losing $1 billion a year, just let people watch shit for free. First of all, why are you making people pay $15 a month for this? You're already losing a lot. Anyways, I think the whole, what do they call it? Like Peyton and Eli. They do that whole thing during football games. And I don't get it. I don't like that shit. I think they're boring and whatever. But, like, people love it. They're like, oh, hey, these cool, former NFL players talking about the game, shooting the shit. Right. They have a guest on in real time.
In real time. So part of the screen, you're watching the game. The other part, you're seeing those guys. I think this could work for F1. I mean, think of all the F1 fans. Just license the stream We'll pay, whatever amount we have to pay per viewer. If we think we can make the money back, we'll do it. If not, all right, we won't do it.
I agree. I think they also should have live broadcasts of all radio transmissions.
Yeah.
I think they should have live broadcasts of all vehicle telemetry. But obviously, I know for proprietary reasons, they're not going to do that. But I think as a fan, it would be, more content, and the more into the details you can see and get, I think the more enjoyable it is. I think that's been the model for Fox and like ESPN covering football and hockey and all this stuff. They are trying to give more content, more details, all this kind of stuff from the actual games, from the events. And I think if F1 can kind of learn from that model, I think it would be pretty cool for the fans. And maybe Apple is the one to do all of that, but we'll see.
Speaking of money, I saw a series of tweets by Joe Pompliano, is his name, and he writes about money in sports, and in sports there is a lot of money. And he basically said the Los Angeles Dodgers are Japan's team now. In part, I mean, they got, they signed, how do you say, Shohei Ohtani? Shohei Ohtani. And they've signed another Japanese player. But it's not just that. The MLB sent them, LA, to go play their opening season games in Japan, massive turnouts. And LA, the Dodgers, have spent a few years really trying to market themselves as Japan's team. And the Japanese people have embraced it to where, according to this man, it's brought in $100 million in incremental annual revenue. And in baseball, that is a lot. And especially because it's from Japan. And I was like, somebody needs to do that in F1 for America. I mean, Haas had the opportunity and blew it. They underspent. They outsourced everything to UK, Italy, Ferrari. And it just didn't work. Maybe Cadillac can do this. Like really just sort of embrace, yes, it's a global sport. Yes, Cadillac obviously wants to sell more cars into China. But it's like just some team should just embrace. I mean, like I said, we've got the big Las Vegas race. We've got 3 races. We got all the social media and tech sponsorship. I mean, just someone needs to be America's F1 team.
I agree. I think fans here deserve that. I think you see what even just a driver means to a whole country. Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, for example. I mean, Hamilton was fucking knighted, he's got his name on one of the straights at Silverstone, an iconic, historic circuit, right? Crazy. Everywhere Max goes, at the very least in Europe, the Orange Army follows. I mean, it's pretty insane. So when F1 comes to America, it's kind of like, whoever Americans have chosen as who they like for whatever reason, they go out and cheer for them. And that's similar in a lot of locales that F1 races in. But I think it could be so easy for a team to come in with a driver and really market towards, being America's team. And Cadillac should do that. I think they would benefit a lot from it. And, I think it'd be fun.
Across the line, that's our segment where we predict the winners of the next race. Next race is in 2 weeks in Japan. If we choose a driver and he does finish in the top 5, we get a point. If we get him in the exact right spot, we get 3 points. Patrick, before I ask you for the current standings and before we make our predictions, I forgot to ask you, give me your top 5 drivers for the Chinese Grand Prix.
Ooh, okay. Top 5 drivers. I think Oscar had a very good weekend. qualified pretty well, did well in the sprint, obviously won the race, and really had no issues with anybody behind. Pretty much just like a controlled and mature sort of drive. It's something we've seen from Max a lot, and I think Oscar just had a really solid weekend. Then I have George once again, kind of just trundling up in there and into third, and I'm pretty sure is he P2 or maybe still P3 in the driver standings, but I think he's been super quiet, but he's right there. I mean, I think Lando, Oscar really got to watch out for him. I think all eyes are kind of on Verstappen, but if you're not paying attention to George, been saying it for years. He's a silent assassin. Like, he'll kill you.
I'm with you. And right now, so Lando, after 2 races in a sprint, has 44 points. He's ahead. But then Verstappen at 36, Russell at 35, Oscar at 34.
Oh, wow.
This is close.
Nice. Then I got, maybe went a little off script, but I got Ocon here. Before any DQs, he was up there in 7th, maybe, I think. So pretty impressive showing from a Haas driver, and really turned it around after, I don't know, they just looked horrible last weekend. So yeah, good from him.
I mean, 2 races in, I think we can make the case Ocon and Behrman both could have got driver of the day. I mean, they're in Haas. They're driving Haas, So, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I do have Behrman next.
Oh, how about that?
He looks like he's driving really well, but his qualifying performances are quite poor. And, obviously last weekend didn't even really get to qualify because he crashed out in practice and messed up his car. But he just hasn't seemed to have that 1-lap pace, but has looked pretty good during the races. So that's good to see. And then I have Alex Albon. I think he's just been solid. And I think a lot of people expected Sainz to come in and really push him. And he's just looked better.
He has.
Sainz has looked fine, I guess, kind of whatever. But Albon looks comfortable and confident and is driving well. Got points today.
I think Albon has matched, maybe even surpassed how many points he had last year. All of last year. I'd have to look at that. I don't have the screen up, but that's close. And look at the constructor standings. McLaren obviously way ahead, 78. Mercedes 57. P3. Red Bull with 36. But then it's a tie. 4th and 5th. Ferrari and Williams, 17 points. Almost all of that is Albon.
Well, that's just embarrassing for Ferrari, but,
Yes. 2 races in a sprint and they're tied with Williams. No one predicted that. Okay, so you have for top 5 for Chinese Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri, George Russell, Esteban Ocon, Ollie Behrman, and Alex Albon. So for across the line, what are the current standings?
Well, last week, we didn't have great weeks. You outscored me 4-1. So that was our total coming into this race. We did a bit better this week. So actual top 5 was Piastri, Norris, Russell, Verstappen, and Leclerc was changed to Ocon after the disqualifications. Your top 5 was Verstappen, Norris, Russell, Lawson, Hülkenberg. So you ended up with 7 points, 1 for Verstappen, not in the correct place, and then 3 each for Norris and Russell, 2nd and 3rd. Given Leclerc's disqualification, I ended up with a single point. My top 5 was Antonelli, Piastri, Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc. So instead of 4, I got 1 from Piastri in 2nd place.
Ouch.
So I guess that means current standings are now 11-2 in your favor.
Ooh, I gotta keep that going. Keep going. All right. Who goes first for the Japanese Grand Prix?
You have first pick.
Nice. I don't know, McLaren, that's 2 wins in 2 races, but Max has always been right there. George has always been right there. I'm going to go with George Russell.
Interesting. Let's see. I am going to go, I don't know. I'll take a McLaren driver. I'll just say they swap it around again. We'll go Norris and then Piastri. So it was Norris first in Australia, Piastri first in China, and then Norris maybe first in Japan.
All right, we'll see. Then I'm going to go strike while the iron's hot. Max in P2. And I say Ferrari doesn't get it figured out. I'm going with Antonelli in third.
Ooh, that would be good to see him on the podium. All right. Well, I guess if the Ferraris are available, then I'm going to take Lewis in P3, get his first GP podium for Ferrari.
Nice.
And then we'll take their current Constructors' Championship rivals, and I'll take Alex Albon, P4.
That's funny. All right. I'm going to go Charles Leclerc, the forgotten man, apparently. And in P5, we'll take Carlos Sainz, Albon's teammate. So I have George Russell, Max Verstappen, Kimi Antonelli, Charles Leclerc, and Carlos Sainz. You have Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, another McLaren 1-2, Lewis Hamilton, Alexander Albon, and in fifth?
In fifth, we'll go with, I don't know, we'll say the tearful Frenchman, Isaac Hadjar.
Any crazy predictions, Patrick, for Japan or the rest of the season?
Well, I can turn my comment into a prediction, I guess, because I just gotta say, there are certain things about F1 that really annoy me. And so one of those things is at the end of a race, you have a driver that has won this race. And you know what he comes on the radio and says? He goes, "Oh, wow. Good job, guys. Thanks. Yeah, that was really nice. Well done, everybody. Good job." I'm like, dude, come on. Celebrate a little bit. Like, act like you fucking care. Like, right. Come out and be like, take that, motherfuckers. We're so much better than everybody. Get fucked, everyone. Like, let's keep it up. Whatever. I don't know. Just like, I need some celebrations. So I'm going to say, because I picked Lando Norris to win next weekend, that as soon as he crosses the finish line, checkered flag, he comes on the radio and just absolutely blasts Oscar. Just drives him into the ground. And that will begin a feud between these two drivers that will entertain us for the rest of the season.
Nice. We really need a feud. We need a team feud.
I know.
I tell you. All right. I don't have a good one. I'm with you. I don't think Yuki. Oh, here's a good one. A crazy prediction. Yuki will not drive for Red Bull this year, but Max Verstappen will drive for Ferrari next year.
Ooh.
Charles will get booted.
Wow.
All right. Just a quick word. Rest in peace, Eddie Jordan. Almost made it to 80. F1 legend. Gotta say, I love F1. And I think F1 in the third decade of the 21st century, it's a better product. The racing's better. The drivers are better. The cars are better. But as an old man, there's some sadness there. And we've got these fast-talking Irish tricksters like Eddie Jordan. We got the big swinging dicks like Frank Williams. These guys basically made an F1 team out of thin air. They were hustlers. And those days are gone, and I'm a little sad about that. All right. I want to thank you all for listening to Everybody's Most Beloved Father and Son F1 podcast. It is much appreciated. And we are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
You just finished listening to Hard Compound, recorded in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and around the world.